Hello, everybody. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation today. And I want to let it be known that this is a direct conversation with myself and the baby boomer demographic. I want to let you know that you were once seen as the greatest generation of the United States of America. And unfortunately, younger generations now see you as a tagline, as a catchphrase. But that does not have to be forever. And truth be told, it's mainly because of how the way the news is being sent over to you and the issue with the understanding and the analyzing that broadcast news has shifted over the past 50 years so dramatically. So I want to jump into that right now. Just to get started, I want to say that originally equality was meant to be in the news. And I mean that in the way of representation of each story. When one topic was presented in the news, it was forced through the fairness doctrine that both sides would have to be presented no matter what. It would be illegal if you did it the other way. In the 80s, this was completely abolished, meaning that organizations could now talk about a story in any light that they wanted to. And this means that they could kind of change the story whether or not what they were saying is actually true. Moving on to that, since they did not have to report equally anymore, they could kind of shift the way that they were talking to make it side with what they were trying to push. Because they were trying to push a certain narrative, they would change the way a story was being presented. And basically, from that, it means that instead of originally intended, the audience making their own opinion from what the story is being presented, the news anchor, the media company can now help you find that opinion based on what the story is telling you to do. So there is a shift here, and it's very much from the framing theory. And last point I want to add in the slide is that these stations craft their stories based on their most loyal audience, which based off of numbers over the past 30 years is still the baby boomer population. This very much has to do with the framing theory, once created by Irving Goffman in the 70s, has been heavily adapted since the 90s. Basically, the framing theory revolves around how the way the story is being told. And the way the story is being told has now been shifted. So you can have a different perception of the story than it was originally intended. News companies can manipulate the details of the story. So you have a different emotion or a different reaction or a different kind of understanding than you would have if you just got it straightforward. Coming through that point, the framing theory also has a connection with the agenda setting theory, which means that these news organizations have a message that they want to represent. That's why CNN and Fox News are so politically different and separated than they've ever been before. So now, because the fairness doctrine's gone, news companies can shift the way these stories are being told so you can lean in one or the other direction, depending on which version of the story is being told to you. And a frame also is just to sum it up one more time, is just the way you are being shown in the light of that story. So to move on to that in a little bit more detail, there's two basic principles on how framing is happening. And that is like we build our frames to we build our frames to make our audience get an emotion. And we do that by moving away some of the different aspects of the story. So, as the previous slide said, this can be either highly natural or this can be a bit more manipulated. So the example I wrote for this first part is if I want to write a story about the drug problem in San Francisco, I would want to have just tons of videos of needles on the street, homeless people using drugs, and just different substances all over the floors. I'd want to see dirty areas. And if I wanted to manipulate this story, whereas it's a really big call to action, I would manipulate it so it looked like every single street in San Francisco looked like this, even though people who live in San Francisco very much know that that's not true. So that's how we build our frames. And once that's set, the audience is going to react. So if they were to react to my story, the audience would have sympathy for those in San Francisco with the drug addiction. But more importantly, they would be outraged that the city looked like this, that this was happening. And they would call upon our leaders and the people in charge to make sure that this wouldn't happen. Also, depending on the news source, depending on the way that it's leaning, you could also lean for more power and more people to help out, or you could cause on the crime. Depends on how you want the story to go. And that's what news companies are doing once again. And the real biggest issue is they are aiming directly for baby boomers. I know it's crazy, but the news station is building these frames around their number one audience, which are baby boomers. The stories that are being provided nowadays are likely the ones that are affecting your lives the most, whether you think about it or whether you don't. Since the fairness doctrine is gone, media companies can do this at any time or in any place. The need for equal representation has been moved over to a shift of telling you how things should go instead of helping you internalize where you would like things to go. That's why, as well, why debate segments, as well as opinion-based talk shows on news, have gotten so popular over the past 30 years than they ever were. So let's jump into a new example of this in the news. Get into something topical. During the 2024 election, President Trump made major headlines when he was seen working at McDonald's for the day. And basically, the president was using his platform to demonstrate himself as a working class citizen, whether he had been in the past or he had in the future, didn't matter at this point. He was demonstrating himself that he could work at the ground level that every citizen or working class voter has worked, the type of job they've worked at least at some point in their life. News stories ate it up and posed him in a very high fashion, but there was a deeper meaning. He was trying to separate himself from Vice President Kamala Harris, who in the debate claimed that she had worked at McDonald's. And this is very much true because after the debate, he said that he specifically said that he had worked more time at McDonald's than Kamala Harris had ever worked in her life. So by him going to McDonald's, he was not only showing that he's not afraid to get his hands dirty, that he's a man of the people, that Vice President Harris was highly untrustworthy and made viewers think that maybe she hadn't worked this job ever really before. And the main point I want to get down here is at the very bottom that if voters could see Donald Trump as a man of the people, then the frame is set. So the agenda could be that they could see his policies being for the people. Moving on from here, what can we do? It's a long world out here, and now we are filled with so much media, it's hard to separate ourselves. So basically coming from here, because the ability to find equal representation is just so vast, we have to look for so many more outside resources. One of my biggest one of my biggest recommendations, so sorry. One of my biggest recommendations is that we start looking at newer platforms, specifically YouTube, podcast, Instagram, specifically because it has now changed the way framework has become. Not only can it help you see that the framework of television is flawed, but it'll also show the new lines of framework being used in modern society. It's important to know that frames don't really ever end. They just change the face. So no matter what, in 10 years' time, we're going to have to do this for Gen X. We're going to have to do this for millennials. We're going to have to do this for Gen Alpha. But because because frames advance, so will be the style moving forward. In conclusion, as younger generations further their understanding of the framework, so should baby boomers. And I want to add that almost all generations past baby boomers have already gotten this level of education. So why should baby boomers not have the opportunity to learn more? And to finish it out, just because the fairness doctrine is no longer written into law doesn't mean that its morals are still not in place. The demonstrations of great reporters like Walter Cronkite may not exactly be into place, but there's the morals and the drive that he had is still around. They just take a lot more looking than before. So, what I would recommend is you take a look at some of these references. These are some pieces of information that I really enjoy that you should take a look at. I highly recommend if you want to get in the very beginning, you start at Goffman's frame analysis, and there's a lot more to be explored there. So, thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation, and I hope to hear from you soon.